Okay, so just want to go through all of the main modelling tools now that we've had a look at the mass modelling tools and started to look at how you can use the modelling tools with families. Do you want me to take your screen over as well? Or?
Yep.
Oh, you do? Okay, so just 16. Okay, so I've got here a view just with the section box turned on because I wanted to use the reception area maybe to show you some examples of some different kinds of modelling. So I'm going to use model in place and then maybe just start by looking at some of the different categories you have there, and maybe something that's important to realise with Revit. So guys, can you just keep it down? Guys, can you just keep it down? Yeah. Okay, so again, when you have a look at the list of categories here that you have with model in place, you might have realised already that there are a few categories there that aren't available when you make a loadable family. And this should be one of your first considerations when you begin modelling. I'll cancel that just to show you the difference. If you go to make a new family and then have a look at the templates that are available, I'm just going to go to list. And so you can see there is no ceiling template, there's no floor template, there's no wall template. And again, if we go to model in place, you do have the option though of making a wall family or a floor family or a ceiling family when you make a when you use model in place, essentially. And that's an important realisation, because if you need to use a modelling tool to create, for example, a wall that you can't create using a basic wall, in other words, the wall tool on the architecture tab, the only option is to use model in place. But other things like doors and windows and furniture, of course, you can either use model in place or you can make a loadable family. And there's a good reason for that. It's to do with the fundamental design of Revit. And once you understand why it's set up that way, it'll give you, well, you should have then a good understanding of the structure of all of the software. So again, here just looking a little bit more at the categories, you might have wondered what the difference between, say, the casework and the furniture category is, other than just allowing you to group those two things together. And so I'll just show you. I'm going to make a casework family very quickly, and I'll make something simple, just an extrusion. And I didn't check my level. That's no problem. I can go to edit work plane and then change that to the ground floor. So I can see that now, and I'll just change the height. And I'll finish that one, and then I'll make another family using model in place. So it's important you realise when you're using model in place, you're still making families. And this time I'll use the furniture category. And again, I'll go to make an extrusion, and this time I will check that I'm working on the ground floor level. Go to draw a rectangle. Okay, finish that one. And so if we look at those two things side by side in a section view, you'll see straight away what the difference is. Just going to move this section across so that you can see those two things being cut through. So zooming in there, hopefully you can see it's fairly obvious what the difference is. The one on the left is the one made using casework, the one on the right is made using furniture. And it'll be the same when you place components. So you can see the casework is obviously being cut, the furniture is showing as though it's not being cut, even though the section line is cutting through it. And so you can actually see all of these settings if you go to the Manage tab, and then Object Styles. And so there you have all the different display options for those different categories, and there you can see that casework has an option for projection. Most of the projections are just set to pen number 1, and then it's got an option for cut. But furniture has an option for projection but no option for cut. So it just uses the line weight for projection in every view. Okay, so think about the category that you use, but you can change the category. I just double-clicked on this one to go and edit it, and then, so it would have been the same if I had selected it and then gone to edit in place. And then if you go into the on the Create panel there, you can see in Properties, the button in the top right in that group of 4 buttons there is Family, Category and Parameters. And you can usually change the category of your family after you've created it. So I could change this to furniture. Doesn't always work, so some things won't be allowed, but most of the time you can change it. So you can see there now that's showing the same as the other one. But I'll delete those and I'll go back and model something a little bit more involved. So back to model in place. And so aside from the category, just try to think about when you need to use model in place. You shouldn't be using it all the time. So anything that's repeated, as I was saying earlier, if something is used more than once or it's repeated in your project, you should think about using a loadable family, which means going to make a family from the main menu there using one of the family templates. But in this case, I'm going to make a reception counter, and that would be something that is unique in this project. So I'm going to, again, go to Model in Place, make casework the category, and I'll just call it reception. It is good to give your families meaningful names. It just makes your life easier when you go to find them later. And I can model in this isometric or axonometric view fairly easily, as long as I think about the plane that I'm drawing in. So using the Set button on the Create panel there, or the Create tab, I can choose any level, any grid line, or any reference plane I've named. So I'm simply going to choose ground floor. And then I'll start with a revolve. That's what I was going to start with. So using the revolve tool, I want to make a counter that is going around these columns, sort of circular, and then I want to have it curving back at the end. So I'm going to have to use a sweep as well. And so I thought I'd just show you though, if I try to make a revolve using the ground floor plan, what will happen, and this should make it clear, have any of you struggled to get the revolve tool to give you anything useful? Or have you been trying to set shapes to go in different directions maybe and not getting that to work with revolve? Okay. So I'll just show you what will happen. If you don't do anything, if you're drawing in a ground floor plan, it will be very similar to what I'm doing now. So if I draw a shape, I'm just going to draw a shape maybe that's close to the counter that I want, so something like this. I'll just do a rectangle, that's pretty close. Okay, so you need a profile, and then you also need an axis line. So with a revolve, you need those two shapes. The profile needs to be closed, and the axis needs to just be an open straight line. Tick to finish, and it will revolve the shape around the axis. And you can choose the amount of the revolution, so how many degrees. So I'll set that to, let's say, start at 45 and maybe to end at, let's say, 135. So that will be a total of 90 degrees, but yeah, wouldn't you know it, it's gone down below, so we'll make that 225. Not two. Oh, sorry. Do that again. 225 and 45 should come up above. Oh, there we go. So that's almost right, but actually I want to go the other way. So let's make it 315. Which way is that going to go? Yep, there we go. That's what I want. Okay, so the difference between those two angles is 90 degrees. So you can see there between these two lines is 90. Looking at this from the front. And we can go any angle in between. So if I wanted to go 180 degrees instead of 90 degrees, the difference between the two angles needs to be that. So 0 to 180 might go underneath. Yep, it is. So that'll be instead 180 to 360 would make it go above. But I've found, anyway, that revolving things from the ground plane isn't all that useful. Most things that need to be revolved, especially for building elements, need to be revolved in a different plane. Because you often want to revolve sideways, or maybe if you've got a clock or something, or anything that's round sitting on a wall surface, you'll be revolving it in elevation. So I'll delete that. And before I go to make the next one, I'm going to set a plane that I can draw vertically. I'm going to go to the ground floor plan to draw that. And, sorry, this end of the building. So there are my 4 columns. And I'm going to draw a reference plane in line with the front of those columns. And then also, just to help me with the set out, I'm going to do another one that's in between those columns, exactly in the middle. So I'll just draw a dimension and make that equals. And actually I didn't really need it because I've already got a centre plane and my columns are centred, but it doesn't hurt to have it. So then, but this plane's the important one. So that plane is the one I want to draw on. So the most important thing, if you want to draw on a reference plane, do you remember what you need to do? Exactly, name it. That's right. So here, yep, spot on. So over here in properties, I can give it a name. So I'm going to call this reception revolve plane. And then you can see I've got a section going this way.
If you don't mind, my eye is confused.
Yes, sure, that's fine. Nice. Okay, so I've got a section going to the side, but I don't have a section that's going across this way. So there's a little trick you can use. If you want to go and make a view, you need to have something solid in the family. So I'm just going to make an extrusion. Any size, it doesn't matter. So that I can finish the family. It won't let me finish it otherwise. And then I can make a view. So I can go and make a section view cutting across. Sorry, going the other way. Let's move it down a little bit. Okay, so then I can see there's the extrusion I made, and I can select that, go to edit and place to take me back into the family. And I'm going to delete that now. And so I've done that so that I can see this centre line as I make my revolve. So now finally I can go to revolve, and this will happen every time you go to make a solid shape. In other words, use any of these modelling tools, and you're in a section on elevation view. It will always ask you for a work plane, unless you're working in a family file and the plane's been predefined. But if you're in a project file, it will always ask you, because there won't be a plane already defined. And so here, just as before, I could choose any grid line, any level, or of course the reference planes that I've named. And so again, reception revolve plane is the one I've just made to make my revolve, obviously. So I'm going to choose that, click OK, and then draw the shape I want my counter to be. So I'm going to start fairly simply just drawing a rectangle. And then, do you know standard height for a counter? Yeah, it can be 900. So 900 for bench tops is a good height, or then 1200 for a higher level is good as well. So so 900 though is okay if you're going to have a single level. So I might make this 900, and then we'll see if I might add another level later and make that a bit higher. So I'll do it 900, and then I want to make this fairly deep, so I'm going to make the thickness there, I'm going to try 250. Yep, that's about what I'm after. And then I want to set this out for my column so that it's centred either side. So I'm just going to draw some dimensions in to help with that. So I think 250 each way should work pretty well. Yep, that makes it 850. That's pretty close to what I'm after. Maybe actually, sorry, 275. And then any of you who've done a lot with AutoCAD might find the next tool really useful, fillet arc. So the fillet tool in AutoCAD I think is still quicker, but at least you have the option in Revit as well, but in the draw panel, to use fillet arc to round off the corners. So I can choose these two corners, also choose the two lines, place an arc, and then I have to click on the radius afterwards to set a measurement. So guys over there, can you just keep it down while I'm talking, please? Okay, so I'm going to make the radius there fairly large, 50 mil. I want this to be obviously rounded. And it might be obvious now as well when you see what I'm doing with this shape, why I couldn't use extrusion to make this shape. If I didn't have these rounded corners, I could do everything just using an extrusion. But I want to have this done with a bit more detail in it, so again, extrusion won't work. Okay, so I've got my profile done. Now I'm going to go to axis line. So just so it's clear, I was using boundary line to draw the profile. Now I'm going to go to axis line and simply draw over that centre line I established earlier. Tick to finish, and that's going to revolve sideways. So if I look at this now back in the 3D view, you can see that it's revolving parallel to the ground because my axis is perpendicular to the ground. And I'm going to change the start angle there to 180. Here you've got to use a bit of trial and error sometimes to work out the direction. So if it's 180, then there we go. Well, that's actually given me what I wanted first go, but it might have needed to be 0 to 180 instead of 180 to 360. So the direction is dependent on the on a few things, and often it's easier just to use trial and error to work it out. So again, in this case, what I had before, 180 to 360, gave me what I wanted. And so now looking at that, I can see, well, I don't mind the shape of it, but maybe I want that to be a bit deeper. So I can always select it, and then go to Edit Revolve. And if I select one of these lines, I should just be able to nudge that down to make it deeper. Could do this in the section view, of course, but I like working in 3D views. So I'm going to finish that, and you can see then that's giving me a deeper profile. To do a set of cupboards underneath, I could do another revolve, but maybe just so it's clear, I'll show you could easily do make an extrusion for that. So if I go back to create and then extrusion, I can use an arc with centre ends arc, I've got the centre there established, so I can simply draw my my arc using that centre point. Maybe make that radius a little bit less. And then offset. Oops. So something like that. Okay, so because I don't need the base to have any rounded edges, I'm not going to worry about doing a kickboard just yet. I'll just do a simple base or carcass for the cupboards there. And I'll make the height, it's about 500, I'll work that out properly in a moment, so I'm just going to finish that. And then back in my 3D view, I can see, well, it's pretty close to the right height, but if I orbit around, I can see that there is a bit of a gap there. So maybe then in my section view, I can adjust the height of that. Okay, so then back into the 3D view. Just before I go and put in the next part, which is going to require a sweep, I'm going to finish that and just show you one of the pitfalls people often have when they're using model in place, and that is to keep using model in place whenever they need to make a new shape. So I want to extend this counter and have it continue through these columns, which I'll probably clad and make look a bit nicer as well later on, but for now I just want to at least have the counter extending beyond or through those, and I'll need to obviously model something else there. So it's really important that you don't just go to use model in place again every time you need to model something new. If it should be grouped with the things you've already modelled, it's much better, of course, to select it, go to edit in place, and then you can use all of those modelling tools and those things will be grouped together. And I'll show you where this can be a real problem. So you might have, for example, a lattice or a slatted screen, and so, well, I'll show you a really good family you can use for this as well later, but just to do something very quickly, go to model in place, and I'm going to set my plane to ground floor, and make an extrusion. Okay, something very simple, and just make it 50 mil high. And I'm going to go then to my section view. And I want to copy that up, so I'm going to dissociate it, this button here. If you haven't noticed that one before, that will come up whenever you model a solid. And when that's still active, you can see there I can't lift this object away from the ground plane that I've modelled it on. But if I click on that button, diamond, that dissociates it from the work plane, and then I can copy it anywhere. Now, what I'm going to do before I copy it though is finish the model. I see a lot of people do this. I'll then copy that object, or do an array. Let's do an array instead, actually. Oh no, sorry, no, I'll do a copy, just so it's clear. So, I'm going to just copy it a few times. Okay, so you might think that's a good way to do a screen, and it's not bad, but there's a major issue in the way that I've done it there. Oops. So don't need those extra ones. Okay, so if I need to change the material of those, what do you think you need to do? Exactly. Exactly. Each one needs to be done separately. So, I mean, with my interior design students, I see this all the time. They have lots of repeated elements like this because they're doing all these detailed screens and things constantly. And I've seen projects where they have hundreds of them. And then only realise at the end that they've copied them after finishing the model and they've either then got to select each one, go to edit in place, select it, change the material. Okay, so I'll just choose some wood material. There we go. No, you can't. No, because they're separate families. So no matter what you do, you can't change the materials of them as a group. Except by, so basically you just have to edit each one separately. So the better way to do it is, of course, not to do it that way, but to copy them within the family. Okay, so back to the section. So if I just, instead of copying it as it is, went to edit and place first, and then copied it. Let's do a few. And then, now, because they're all the one in the one family, I can finish it. If I need to edit them, select it, edit in place, just make a window to select all of them, and I can change the materials as a group. That easy. So just need to think about how you group those objects together, because it does make a huge difference to the time you spend editing things. So now again, I want to extend this reception counter, and so I'll go and edit that in a moment. But one other little thing I'll show you, if you need to make something like a screen, I'm going to go back to model in place and show you one slightly better way of doing it. Okay, so you can place components as part of a family, as part of a model in place family. So if I go to component now, load family, and then the one I want is in structural framing. No, sorry. It's one I've made. Where did I put it? I thought I put it in structural framing. No, it's not there, so I'll get it from somewhere else. Oh, okay, sorry, it's in the... Here we go. This one, structural... There it is, adjustable box. Okay, so it's a very simple family I've made, but this is something you'll need to use all the time. You'll always need to put in boxes of different sizes to make all kinds of things in your buildings. And so this family I've made will work for any box-shaped object. And did I forget to set the plane? I think I did. So, here we go. The level's gone up to level 4. So we'll just, here you go, set the level to ground floor. That's a bit better. There we go. And so this one, you'll see, if you look at it in plan view, you can adjust the length simply by stretching the ends. So I've set this family up so that you can stretch it in plan, as simply as that. You can't do that to set the height, so if you need to adjust the height, all you need to do is type in what you want in properties. You don't need to do edit type or any of that. There's no duplicating required unless you want to change the material. So everything you can do simply in the properties panel over here. And I've done that deliberately because you will often need lots of different sizes and you don't want to have to go and constantly have to duplicate every time you just want a different size. Okay, so then in the section view, I can copy that or array. And so I'll just make this, 150 will do. And make 20 of them. Okay, now of course because that's an array, I can adjust spacing of one and it will adjust them all. Now you might think that's basically the same as what I had with the extrusion that I modelled, but the advantage in terms of your file or your file size is that Revit only needs to store that object once. And then each time it's copied, it just needs to store the new insertion point for each copy. So in your project file, it's just got the original family defined once. Whereas if you do it with an extrusion and then copy the extrusion multiple times, it's got to store all of the geometry all of those times that it's copied, which will make the file size much bigger. So that's another thing you need to think about when you're making families, and that's one of the reasons that it's important to make a separate family file whenever you have something that's repeated in your projects, because it will make the file much more manageable in terms of the file size. So again, that's all done within a family, so I'll finish that, and that makes it grouped. So, now it's got an issue with the category. Okay, so I made it casework. This is a structural element, so I'm going to go to my family types, like I showed you before, and change that to structural framing. It doesn't like me. Okay, so let's go back there. That should be okay. Why is it not letting me? Let's see if I ungroup them maybe. There we go. Okay, so I didn't like the array, but that's okay because it doesn't need to be an array being a component within a family. It's fine. So you've got the group option as well, and we'll maybe spend a bit more time looking at groups later as well. Have you all used the group tool to group things together and duplicate groups and things like that? So that's a really useful thing for managing repeated items as well. But model in place is also really useful. So going back here to the reception counter, just to finish off there, the extra part that I want, like I said, needs to be done with a sweep. So I'm going to select that, go to Edit and Place, and then now I'm going to go back to my ground floor plan and draw. Also, I was going to say I was going to draw some more reference planes, but I thought I'd actually show you instead that I can use these grid lines. They'll work just like reference planes. So I've got grids 4 and grids 5 and grid 5. So I'm going to go to the section view that I have here. Where was it? This one. And then make a sweep. And so then you can see a sweep's a bit like a revolve. You need to make two things, but for a sweep you need to make a path and a profile. So I'm going to go to sketch path, and you should do the path first, always. And then it's again going to ask me to choose a plane because I'm drawing in a section view. So this time it will be grid 5, was the one on the right. So we'll click OK. So just so it's clear, I'm drawing on this grid line. So I'm going to draw the path just using a line initially to go from the midpoint of my counter all the way to the end of my column. And then I'm going to switch to drawing an arc, make this a fairly big arc, 45 degrees, something like that, and then back to drawing a straight line. Okay, and so then I'll show you this in 3D so it's a bit clearer what I'm doing. So you can see then I've got this line coming out of my counter, and so basically I want the counter to go across until it reaches the end of the column, then curve down into the floor. So I want the same shape I've used for the counter for my profile. And when you make a sweep, you need to keep an eye out for this gizmo here. That is your work plane that's going to be used for your profile. So unlike a revolve where you often need to make a profile in advance using a reference plane, with a sweep it will make the profile plane for you. I'm going to finish the path, tick to finish, and now I need to go and make my profile. So just here, now a little tip I can give you there, Sometimes this edit profile button will be greyed out. If it is, all you need to do is click select profile to activate it again. I'm going to choose edit profile now, and then I can use pick lines to simply pick the shape I've already drawn for my revolve. And do you remember what to do to get a chain of lines? Yeah, exactly. You can just tab there and get that whole edge with one click. So clicking there, now you can see that the shape has gone over to the left there, but that's exactly what I want because it's gone onto the profile plane. So it's projecting from the revolve onto the plane I'm working on. And this is one of the best things Revit does, projecting in 3D as you draw different 2D shapes. It's a really useful technique that Revit always does really well. So that's it. Tick to finish. Tick again. And that's made my shape. Okay, so then I can mirror that across to the opposite side, simply going into my section view and using mirror pick axis. And so I'm sure noticed that we've got a gap though underneath that needs to be filled in. I mean, it could be okay if it's open, but I want to fill it in just to show you how to do that. So I don't need to make anything too complicated to fill in that gap. If you're just thinking about how the different tools work, well, I'll ask you, which tool do you think you'd need to use to fill in that section underneath? Which of these modelling tools? Exactly, just an extrusion. So what would you need to do though to draw the extrusion? Yeah, either make a reference plane or have a plane that's predefined. And I already have a plane because I drew the sweep on that plane. And so simply by going to the section view I did previously, I can make an extrusion using grid 5. So fortunately I already have that plane defined. And again, just using pick lines here, I can pick most of this, but the sweep sometimes can be a bit hard to snap to, so in some cases it's easier just to draw the lines and use the same values as we had for the sweep. Yep, that's not quite right, so this is a better way of doing it, making sure it's 45. There we go. So I knew the angle, and that way I can work it out again. So there it is. So that's the extrusion. Don't even need to know the depth, because if I go into plan and then set it to wireframe, I can simply match that to the extrusion I did previously. So I'll just try and measure that. 450 and then yeah, 195. Now if that happens, then it's not going to snap to the extrusion here because it's an arc, but I can draw a reference plane from the end of the arc and then snap. Here we go. After I've drawn those two reference planes, either end of this extrusion can be snapped to that. It's that simple. Okay, so there we are. So that should fill in that underside pretty well. We've got a line there between them. I'll show you how to remove that once I've copied this over the other side. So I'm simply going to select it in this view, go to the section view and mirror using the axis there, back into the 3D view, and to finish it off, use the join button to remove that line so it looks like one continuous piece. And that's often the key to modelling complex forms. Massing and all those other options are great, but in many cases you can get forms that obviously are possible with these tools on their own just by combining them. So combining a sweep and a revolve, you can get things that take a profile into different planes, like you have there. Oops, didn't want to do that. Okay, so like I said, swept blend is probably the most complicated of those tools, but also probably the least useful. There are instances where it's useful for organic modellings, like I was saying, but you know, you'll find many projects you won't require it at all. So we'll maybe come to that one later, but the others you'll almost definitely need to use in almost every project. So make sure you know all of those tools. Up to swept blend, so extrusion blend, obviously, and then revolve and sweep. And so later maybe I'll show you a few more tricks with voids as well, but that probably should be enough for now, just to get you going with the modelling tools and thinking about when to use model in place, particularly as opposed to making a loadable family.